Mac Power Users episode 508, One for Me and One for You with Sara Dietschy. Hello and welcome back to Mac Power Users. I'm your host, Stephen Hackett, and I am joined, as always, by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Hello, Stephen Hackett. How are you today?
I'm good. That was very... That felt like I felt that. It was like you said hello, but you were also like giving me a hug at the same time. It was nice.
I want to hug you. Wow. I need a hug. I haven't seen you in a long time. I feel like we don't get enough hugs in general. So you got to take them where you can get them.
Like as humanity, like as modern humans?
Yeah.
Huh. I'm not really a hugger.
That's why I go to Star Wars all the time. I got to hug the Wookiee, you know? See the Wookiee, hug the Wookiee.
How does the Wookiee smell at Star Wars? Does he smell good?
He smells dry cleaned.
Smells dry cleaned.
I feel like I go there enough now. There's one middle-aged nerd that shows up in a vest that has a Rebel patch on it. So now he recognizes me. I was there the other day. He walks past me. He just points at me, sticks his fist out, fist bumps me, walks right past me. Just another day in Batu.
You lead an interesting life.
I told my wife, I said, why did that make my whole day? I don't know, but it did.
Anyways, we have a very special guest today. Sara Dietschy, welcome to the podcast.
What's up? Thanks for having me. I never thought about this, but you guys don't do this together. So you probably don't hang out all the time. That's weird. So you're like best friends. Pretty much. But then you never see each other.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 times a year.
Wow.
For those who may not know who Sara is, she is a YouTuber and a podcaster. She now has a secret startup, which I don't think we're going to get any secrets out of her, but she just announced that last week. Sara, you're super busy, and I want to get into some of that. But first, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do now.
First of all, thank you for having me. Being on a Relay FM show is such an honor.
Oh boy, thank you.
It truly is. But hello, my name is Sara Dietschy, rhymes with Peachy. I live in New York City. I have a YouTube channel. I've been making YouTube videos since 2011, but for the past 4 years professionally. And I have a podcast, and living in New York, I live around a lot of creative friends. So that has led to, trying to solve a creative problem with a software company, which is a new venture. But mostly I make videos about tech and creativity. So anything from laptop reviews to phone reviews to more of a mix of lifestyle because I love tech, but in order to keep me stimulated, I kind of have to do some different things besides just chilling behind a desk and talking about tech. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of everything, but mainly focus on tech and creativity. So it's an honor to be here. And I almost feel like I feel bad being on the Mac Power Users podcast because I'm still like 70% Windows, which isn't that crazy?
We'll get to that. Hey, look, last week we had a guy on who uses one of the Intel compute sticks, but he uses his iPad Pro as the display for Windows on the compute stick. So it takes all types
That's
here on
so
MPU.
Cool.
And honestly, Mac Power Users has always been aspirational. We want folks, when we're not just looking to make a show for Mac Power Users, we're looking to make for a show for people who want to become Mac Power Users. So we're all good.
Totally.
Yeah.
I do have an iMac, which is a very recent investment. So that's a new purchase of mine.
Yeah. We'll get into all of that because I think you have a lot of interesting ideas on what the Mac is good at, what the Windows platform is good at, especially in creative work, which I find your videos on that really interesting as someone who runs a whole creative business from an iMac Pro, how other people solve that in different ways. And I think you've got some interesting takes on that.
Can I just interject real quick about Sara's YouTube channel? Because we talked about it, but we really didn't talk about it. If you're listening to the show, you need to go check it out because Sara has, as she explains, it's a bunch of different types of content. You know, there's stuff in there about creative spaces. There's stuff in there about, making video and camera comparisons. It's just I love the mix of it, but there's a definite opinion to the whole channel. I mean, when I was preparing for the show yesterday, I fell into like a 4-hour hole on your YouTube channel. I never do that.
Love to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As I was telling you before the show, it cost me a new bike helmet. Just like it's cool. I think our audience will really like the stuff you're making, because even though you do, as you say, you've got different interests, there's an opinion and kind of an underlying theme to what you do. And the production values are just amazing across the board. So it's really impressive what you've built over there.
That means a lot. Yeah, I tend to not say that I'm a non-biased reviewer, because I'm like, hey, you're coming to my YouTube channel for my opinion, and that's rooted in the problems that I have as kind of a creator first. So I think there's already plenty of people who are, non-biased reviewers that can take a very subjective look at things and make beautiful things like Marquez. I definitely, with my channel, try to make it clear that, hey, I'll try to be, not biased, but this is also Sara Dietschy talking from my point of view.
I think that's such an interesting change. If you look at people who were sort of grew up in a time where journalism or reporting was supposed to be super objective, right? That's what I learned in school. But today, people look to individuals for their opinion on things, like the exact opposite of what sort of old school journalism is. And they're different things. There's a place for both. But one thing that I find so interesting about your channel in particular is that, and even in watching a video on something that I'm not particularly interested in, or I'm not in a market for a new camera, but I'll watch every video you do about new cameras because I like cameras. Like I can see your point of view over time changing and evolving, and I think you do a good job at explaining, as your needs change, as what you want changes. This solution that I had is now replaced by something new, and I think it's interesting to see someone change and evolve as their workflows, as they change as a person and as their work changes too. And that's something we talk a lot about on the show, is that the workflow or the equipment that you have today may not meet your needs for tomorrow. And that's fine, because, new things come out, things change, and time moves on.
100%. And that's fun. It's more fun that way too,
It's true, especially if you're a gearhead. And
oh, totally.
I think you're guilty of that label.
Oh, 100%. It all started with music and electric guitar, which was probably even more expensive than camera gear.
So let's talk about camera gear a little bit. What are you currently using to shoot your YouTube channel?
So I've always, or not always, to the point that you're making. I started with in Canon land, as we all do, but for the past 3 years, I've been pretty much all team Sony. And when I was using Canon in the beginning, I was using the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. So it's been fun recently to come back around to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K and the 6K. And they solved a lot of problems of the original one. And I shot a lot of docuseries stuff on the original one. And it had so many problems. So that's why when I abandoned that one and abandoned Canon, I just loved Sony. I loved all the video features, the high frame rates. Sony really in the past 3 years has kind of been the leader on the prosumer $2,000, $3,000 best bang for your buck. But yeah, recently, so I'm pretty Sony still, but I recently just bought the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K and the 6K, and have been using that for more of my interview stuff, things that are less YouTube-y. So it's basically in between those two cameras, and then the Sony a7 III, which is my go-to for most, probably I would say 90% of my YouTube videos.
Blackmagic, I keep hearing the name. I used to use one of their video cards before Apple made it a lot easier to capture iOS stuff on the Mac.
Yeah.
But aren't they relatively new in the camera game?
Somewhat. They've actually been more in the broadcast space. In terms of, the average consumer, yes. But they started with, big ol' honkin' broadcast cameras. And they started with cinema cameras. And then, they're very accessible now, which is interesting because they really put impressive cinema features in literally a $1,300 miniature cinema camera, which is the Blackmagic 4K. So it's been really fun to get back into that world, and then also at the same time dive into Resolve, because I've always been a Premiere user, and I mean, I'm very connected to Adobe. They're like the reason why I'm where I am today as well. So I don't want to ever talk bad about them, because I had the Adobe Creative Residency, which basically they paid for my passion projects for a year. I had a salary. Amazing, right? I've always been like an Adobe hardcore user. But just recently, there's been, some stability issues, some frustrations. So I dove into Resolve recently and was very surprised. I mean, Blackmagic is kind of killing it on all fronts, and Resolve is such a good video editor program for only like that, one-time fee instead of the monthly subscription.
At what point does someone go from like a Sony prosumer camera? I know, I guess A7 really is not a prosumer. It's really a professional camera that a lot of consumers buy. But at what point do you know you need to jump up to the Blackmagic?
What's so fun about it too is, they're at similar price points. So I think a lot of people kind of go into it and compare them, but you're right to say it is a completely different step. Like you have to, it doesn't autofocus. I mean, it does, but not well. So if this is something that you want to do YouTube videos, you yourself and you don't have anyone else helping, the Blackmagic is a terrible camera to use. But for me, I do a lot of stuff outside of YouTube where, for an example, the hard drive company LaCie, I basically help run these filmmaking contests every month for them. So it's basically me in front of the camera interviewing a person who is running a filmmaking contest, and I don't want to get up or have someone responsible for hitting the record button twice because the Sony has the 30-minute record limit. So there's certain things on these cameras that are photo and video cameras that get in the way, like a record limit, that the Blackmagic just completely doesn't have because it's a video camera. Like there is a stills button, but there's no settings for that stills button. It's just purely a video camera. And you have the Blackmagic RAW, you have ProRes, you have the 6K camera that, you can record in 6K, which is crazy. And then, maybe reframe for 4K. The dynamic range too is just so different. I'm filming these interviews in a lot of like lofty, cool New York rooms. And it's way more interesting to see what's outside the window than it just being completely blown out. So things like that.
It seems like that one of the differences, I mean, the Sony or most DSLRs do a lot of things. They can take good pictures, they can take good video, they do a lot of things. Whereas like the Blackmagic camera, it's a video camera. It's made to shoot video. Totally,
100%. And it's been interesting to explore that world because I totally was willing to go into the realm of, the C200 and the FS5, FS7, but the value, I'm so used to like getting the bang for your buck, right? But when you start going to the cinema level and you're paying $7,000 or $5,000, you're just getting the body. And then you got to add on an EVF, and then you got to add on all of these things. And a lot of times they don't even shoot good Kodaks internally. And I'm like, wait, I thought that's why I'm getting a cinema camera so I can shoot Canon RAW or all of these things. And so it was really, the Blackmagic just made so much sense for $1,300 and $2,300 when I had the ability to shoot 4K Blackmagic RAW, 4K or 4K ProRes. And it's still such a small body to where I can still one-man band it and interview people and do all those things and carry all of my gear in only 2 bags. I mean, portability is huge for me. So, yeah, as you can tell, I could probably talk about this for hours.
It is interesting to wind back a little bit how far Sony has come in this arena. I too started on Canon and now have the A7 III and have been super happy with it, while Canon seems to be really struggling in that sort of price range. If you want to spend a couple of grand, Canon just isn't there in a way that Sony's really met the needs of a lot of people. Totally.
And they just don't have the specs. And they're just so expensive. And I recently, I make fun of the EOS R all the time just because it's, their first real big attempt at full frame mirrorless. And then the new lenses that they're making for it are just massive. And I'm just like, well, what's the point of like a smaller body if the lenses are bigger, even the DSLR lenses. And there's just so many things about it where it's like it's shooting cropped 4K and blah, blah, blah. And so the specs are never there. But what gets you with Canon is you shoot with it. And for some reason, it just looks so good. And it's one of those things where everyone says, oh, the colors. Like Canon's colors are always going to be better than Sony. And you have Sony Venice color slowly trickling down from its cinema line to other cameras, which I'm excited about. But something about Canon's color. So I don't want to... It's very easy to be like, why are you choosing Canon? That is so dumb. But then I understand it because you shoot with it and it just looks fantastic right out of the camera.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of advanced stuff for people. But I mean, once you see it, like if you go on YouTube and search, Canon color versus, and you'll see it. I mean, you don't have to be an expert at this stuff. It's obvious there. And I think for some people, it's a taste thing too. Mm-hmm. It's like you either like it or you don't. And but all three of us here use Sony to shoot video, and I find that I can do color correction. It looks okay. But I do understand why people still are loyal to Canon because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, same. I love my Sonys. I can get good color out of it. It's just after I use the EOS R, I'm like, okay, I understand now. Doesn't mean that I approve of you buying this slightly overpriced camera, but I understand.
The thing that gets me is just the size of them. I was just looking at someone the other day.
It's crazy, right?
The most recent cam. It looked like he was carrying a brick around, and I'm just spoiled, because like now sometimes I look at my Sony camera and I look at my iPhone and I'm like, maybe today I'm not going to bring the Sony camera.
Exactly, and I think that's why I had an obsession early on with the RX100. I mean, I shot so much of my YouTube channel on just a Sony point and shoot RX100 for the longest time. So it wasn't until really like a year and a half ago, I guess when the A7 III came out, is when I started setting down the RX100 more and just permanently using that. But it just got too much to where, they didn't have a mic jack for the RX100. So the audio would always be terrible. And I'm sure you guys know, as podcasters, you can forgive a bad image, but no one can forgive bad audio. So that didn't last too long.
For our listeners, we've got a lot of listeners that are not making YouTube channels, but they are making like family videos and whatnot. At what point do you think, because the RX series is a great camera line, where do you see that fitting between the video you shoot off something like that and something you shoot off a modern iPhone or an Android phone?
I think the RX 107 that was just released, the most recent one, I think that was the most recent one, has finally hit such a good stride because now it has a mic jack for those times that you need it. But I still think the RX 100 is so great, especially for family stuff, because I mean the iPhone's amazing. I do so much stuff with my iPhone. But when it comes to like you're just at that family event or something and you just want to crop in on Sally, like forget everyone else. So once you start cropping in on things and maybe brightening them up and try to do a little bit of editing, the flexibility that you have with like a legitimate picture from the 1-inch sensor from the RX 100, it's just like there is a certain quality still, with the sensor size and the Zeiss glass in front of the RX 100, where I think like still it's 100% worth it. But then, you can make the argument that mirrorless cameras have gotten such at a good price point. And then you have even Sony's APS-C line with the 6400 and the 6500 and the 6100. There's so many. And you can have interchangeable lenses with that. And you can shoot 4K 60 frames and you have the APS-C. Well, it's like, oh, well, why don't I just go for that? And then you start thinking, oh, wait, if I'm going to do that, why don't I go the full frame in the A7 line? Yeah. So it's like, it's one of those things that I always tell people that just get the camera that you'll bring. So the RX 100, 100%, I still think is going to be a better option than your iPhone, especially with video and audio. But if you're never going to bring that camera to that event, just don't buy it.
Yeah.
And then if you're never going to bring that A7 III to the family event, just get a RX100 and you'll be fine because it's small and it's handy and you're gonna bring it with you everywhere.
It's like we're living through this great democratization of camera technology. Like even, anybody now for a very small amount of money can have what used to be very expensive and professional gear.
Yeah, and it's been fun recently. I've been kind of getting I've been getting into film. Like, oh yeah, I shot film when I was 10 years old. My grandpa gave me his old Leica camera, and so it's been really fun for me to kind of do the exact opposite and learn a little bit about composition. And because I think when we're so obsessed with taking 100 pictures on our iPhone to get that one, there's a lack of curation, there's a lack of composition, there's a lack of understanding what makes a good picture. And it's been so fun to experiment with that because I used to scoff at people who shot film. I was like, what is your problem? But it's really taught me the value of what makes a good picture. And hey, instead of shooting 40 pictures that I'm never going to look at on the iPhone, how about I just focus on taking like 1 or 2 really good pictures, making sure they're good, and make sure they're good enough and organized enough to where I can look back on it.
Yeah, I was that kind of nerd in junior high where I was friends with the teacher that had the dark room, so, we used to all shoot our own black and white and we'd go develop it ourselves. And I honestly cannot imagine doing that ever again. I'm like so over it. I can't even tell you. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by SaneBox. Go to sanebox.com/MPU to get a $25 credit on any plan. SaneBox may be my most used web service. SaneBox helps me manage the deluge of email that I receive every day. I've had a few releases in the past months over at the Mac Sparky Field Guides, and that means the old inbox has been getting hammered. SaneBox has my back the whole time, sorting email with uncanny precision into different folders automatically so I can find everything I need exactly where I expect it. Best of all, SaneBox works everywhere. I've been trying some different applications out on iOS and macOS, and SaneBox follows me along. The mail tools and plugins are breaking everywhere, but not SaneBox. SaneBox runs in the cloud, so no matter how many times you update your operating system, change to different platforms, or just decide to switch a mail app, SaneBox keeps working for you. There is a whole lot SaneBox can do to help you tame your email, like it can send you reminders when people don't reply, it can auto-sort for you, you can even put junk mail into the same black hole and never see anything from that sender again. If you want to get better at email, SaneBox can watch your back. Head over to sanebox.com/MPU and use the link in the show notes here to get a $25 credit on any plan. Thanks, SaneBox, for helping me out with my email and all of your support of the Mac Power Users.
Sarah, I want to talk a little bit about your workflow. First, sort of on the pre-production side, how do you manage what is going to be on your YouTube channel? How do you collect ideas? How do you organize them? How does something go from an idea to something that we're watching at home?
So this is probably the one thing in my life that has always been constant chaos, but an interesting one since I am trying to get more organized as I'm trying to hire people. And it's honestly the hardest thing I think I've ever done in my life, because when you are a solopreneur and the only thing that matters is just you, there's some process that lacks. That's honestly an understatement. But for me, it's really always been, what kind of video do I want to make? And then what is topical and going on in the tech world or the YouTube world, and kind of how can I combine those two things? So for me, I have to also be careful not to, I basically came to terms with, I'm not the YouTuber who's going to cover every single piece of tech. I usually cover iPhones, Samsung, and Google Pixel for phones. And even this year, I just didn't even cover the Pixel because I didn't think it was going to be interesting. And I was kind of right, which is great. So I didn't waste my time on it. But so it's really picking and choosing. I think, it boils down to something that I say like, one for me, one for you. A video like that, One for Me is basically like a 20-minute docu-style film about a really cool camera company that's going to come out in 2 weeks. I'm really excited about it. They didn't pay me for it. I traveled across the world to shoot it. It took so much of my time. But hey, it's like a passion project, right? That's for me. And then the one for them is like, okay, a new iPad came out. Honestly, I don't really care about making a video about it, but it fits into my life. Let's see what I can say about it. It'll probably do decent views, so might as well do it. So in terms of picking what I do, I just try to have a balance of that. And then in terms of jotting down ideas, this is probably like the opposite answer you want to hear, but I am like such a huge sticky note person to where my life is just in sticky notes everywhere. And then if it makes it to one of my apps on my iPhone, that means it'll probably be an actual thing that happens. So I honestly just use Apple Notes and the Things app, where it's basically just a list-taking app for iPhone and iPad and iMac. So outside, and then I use Asana for organization between me and my manager to just handle, okay, we have Squarespace this week and we have Clean My Mac this week and what videos, just so we're on the same page with that. So there is a certain level of organization, but as I'm trying to hire people, I'm realizing, I can't sit and film a talking head piece for 40 minutes and expect another editor to trim it down to the 10 minutes I want. Like, that's just impossible. So now I'm going away from, it's fun for me because I just find the story in the edit. You can't do that when you have other people. So I'm getting better with pre-production and kind of narrowing down what I want to say before. But that has been the biggest challenge for me, truthfully.
No, it's a huge difference between doing it yourself and bringing other people on. And it's not something that usually works the first time right. It's something that evolves, right? Once you start doing it, you find the friction points. And
100%.
And that's something you have to continue to work on.
Totally. Hired my first full-time employee, and it lasted 4 months. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I learned a lot. Most of it was my fault. And then we'll try again. And I learned a lot. I learned that I think I'm going to be better with just a solid team of freelancers, because having someone at my beck and call every single day, Monday through Friday, puts a crazy amount of pressure on me, where essentially it's just another job, and it stressed me out. So yeah, I think I've learned a lot, but a lot of people don't talk about it. Why are people not talking about the freak out of going from a one-person team to just 2 or 3? I'm dying over here.
No, I think those step ups in business are the hardest things that people don't realize. Everybody thinks, well, the hardest part of a business is when it starts failing. That's not the hardest part, because you know exactly what to do then, to save it. But when you go from small to medium and medium to large, there's a million things you can do wrong that you're not even aware of.
Yeah, or even in the beginning when I was doing electrical engineering in college and I was miserable and I needed any creative outlet that I could find to be a job. Even though I was so desperate during that time and I was so miserable, it was still on me. It was only me who could change my destiny. And even though, there was a lot of sleepless nights and feelings of desperation here and there, and it was a long journey of 3 years of figuring it out, it was still just me. I had 100% all of the control. So even in comparison to that, it's still just such a different beast.
I am not going to shame you for the sticky note situation. I'm not going to do that. But I do have a question about, you said you're using Things and then Asana with other people.
Yeah.
How do you sort of know where the line is when it's a task for you and then one that you need to share with somebody else? Is there friction between those two things for you?
Always. 100%. When it comes to my personal YouTube channel, the hardest thing for me to delegate is editing, just because editing has always been my thing. Filming came second. So if someone wants to help me film, I really don't have a hard time delegating that to someone. But with editing, I'm very confident in those skills, and that's kind of where my ego comes in. I'm there's no one who can do it better than me or the same as me. And on some level, no one's going to be me. But guess what? There's like better editors out there. They would cost a ton. And then there's also editors who can get it to 90%. And they might be a little bit more affordable, and I can just do that last 10%. So that's the hardest thing for me, but the easiest thing has been the stuff that I didn't want to do from the beginning. So delegating to my manager, talking to brands, and hiring a lawyer to do all the contracts, and hiring a person to edit my podcast. See, that's something that I've successfully delegated, because the most creative part of a podcast is the conversation. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I've been able to sit in a Google Doc, write out every single step. Here's a template for Premiere, here's a template for this. So that's one thing that I'm very proud of myself that I did. That's on a automatic flow. But it's always the stuff that you love to do that's really hard to delegate. But of course, editing is the thing that takes the longest and is kind of the most annoying.
Well, I would argue it's not even just the thing that you love to do. It's probably something that you've taken on as part of your identity. It's like, no, I am the editor.
That's good.
This is my thing.
Exactly.
I'm good at it. And it's so hard to delegate your identity, right? You have to separate that.
Truth.
I think that's something I run into all the time.
Yeah, there's something attached to it where in the back of my head, I'm like, if I get an editor, people will not think I'm like authentic. I think that's the one thing I can bring to the table, is telling a story through the edit. And so that's constantly been in the back of my head, of just a fear from people that, oh, she's not legit, she doesn't edit her videos. When in reality, 95% of YouTube videos are not edited by the person who's on the camera, for the top people.
For the top percentage.
So it's a journey.
But you talked earlier in the show about editing software, and I made some notes here. A lot of our listeners are like iMovie, maybe Final Cut people. Mm-hmm. Tell it, what is the status of editing software these days for people doing high-end stuff like yourself?
So this is also super fun for me to make videos on, but they take the longest. That's usually how that works. Recently, I basically switched to Resolve for 2 months. And coming from Adobe Premiere, it wasn't that hard of a transition. I just wanted to see if it was on like the same level, the same features, what were the pros and cons. And then I wanted to do the same thing with Final Cut. But it's so funny, I haven't even told my audience this yet. But at the end of the Resolve video, I was like, I'm editing this video in Final Cut. Tune in next month to figure out what my thoughts are on Final Cut. But I just gave up. I could not take Final Cut. I literally, like, my brain does not compute. That was strange, because usually I'm like, I can conquer anything editing, but that's just that shows you how different Adobe and Resolve are to Final Cut. So it's almost like if you have a flow in Final Cut and it works for you and you're happy in your Apple ecosystem, stay there, you're good. You paid a one-time price for your software and they've been updating it pretty well, so you're good. But I think where people are finding kind of like a frustration is over in the Premiere side. So I found Resolve, it is really easy to transition from Premiere to Resolve, just if you have like a week, 2 weeks to set aside. Resolve is very fast. There is a similar feeling to the magnetic timeline in Final Cut in Resolve. It is... I say that it isn't a magnetic timeline, but it just moves super smoothly. That is something that I've only felt in Final Cut. Premiere is not smooth. It's pretty clunky. But with that, in Premiere, what I love about it is you get a ton of like precision. I mean, if you're dragging a clip, you can drag it one frame by one frame. You can go in there with a blade tool and cut something, zoom out all the way and cut one frame. So that's what Premiere is really great at. And Premiere is great with editorial stuff, with sharing templates, making mogarts. So if you're working with a team, you can send a really low, project file to a person who can just reconnect the media super quick and you'll be fine. I don't like how Resolve basically organizes projects into basically a project database. So it's basically a vault for all of your projects, and they don't actually store any of the project data within the folder where all your footage is. Don't like that. But then Resolve has a lot of great built-in transitions and tools that enable, honestly, YouTube editing. Like you're able to do stuff that you need to do in YouTube videos very quickly. From the project window, you can basically resize, you can crop, you can do a Ken Burns transition, all from like, you don't have to go into effects, go into settings. There's presets that is basically just like the wipe transition and, the transitions of just transitioning from, a B-roll to a B-roll clip really smoothly, or maybe you're doing a zoom in to like a blog post, it does those things really easily. So it was really confusing, honestly, for me, because I loved so many things in Resolve, and then I still love so many things in Premiere. And honestly, I wish they could just combine and make like a super mega video editing software, because Resolve has the color too, a lot of flexibility with color grading. So there are my thoughts.
I like what you said about if you have something that works for you, it may not be worth the cost of switching. Like I use Final Cut for my stuff, and I could do what I need to get done. And this is coming from somebody who also uses Audition, which is like Premiere's sibling for audio, but also use Logic. And in audio, I can be more flexible. But there is one factor that you didn't mention, but you talk a lot about on your channel, which is performance. And I know that people over the years have complained about the Mac and Premiere, and I wonder if you could shed a little light on that.
It's in a better position. So I actually do have a recent video that I made where I showed some projects in Premiere on the MacBook, and in terms of render times, it has improved dramatically. So a lot of that has to do with like Intel QuickSync and using Metal and all that yada yada. I've tried to play fair and talk to the Premiere team, talk to the Resolve team, and make sure everything that I'm doing is somewhat the way that they would recommend. So Premiere has gotten substantially better in terms of render time. So just an example, if I was on a MacBook, doesn't matter really what year, a 2017 up until like a 2019 MacBook, if I was exporting a 40-minute 1080p interview, it would always take more time than the actual amount of time the video is, if you had color grading on it, because I usually always have color on my stuff. So like a 40-minute interview would basically take an hour, 20 minutes to export. But now with a recent update and the use of Intel QuickSync and just the hardware encoding of H.264 and H.265, or HEVC, getting too much in the weeds. With that, they've just improved so many things, and now that same 40-minute 1080p interview would now only take like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, depending on what effects you have on it. So
wow, crazy
improvements. But then you still have general concerns about stability. So as someone who's in Premiere almost every single day, I have seen huge improvements in stability. It's not crashing every day, but it still crashes much more. I mean, when I was in Resolve for a couple months, it didn't crash once. I think the only related closing of the program that I had was just because it was something with my hard drive or something. It wasn't directly related, but you don't understand, or I guess people don't understand, if you're in Premiere, the type of stability that other people have. If it's Resolve or Final Cut, I mean, maybe you guys can speak with this with Final Cut, because not from my personal experience, but it seems like everyone's screaming on the internet at me when I bad talk Final Cut, is it never crashes. So, but yeah, so really in terms of with macOS, it isn't a concern anymore with render times. Of course, if you have like a RTX NVIDIA graphics card and you're dealing with a lot of graphics and you have that in your laptop, of course Premiere is still going to be faster on a Windows machine with the CUDA processing, but it's gotten bearable now.
Yeah, that's a lot of frustration, I think, from the high end of the Mac market is the Mac's GPUs. Even in the MacBook Pro, it's just not what you can get on the PC side. And the Mac Pro, the forthcoming Mac Pro, will change that, but then you're in a really expensive machine.
Yeah.
Most people are doing this sort of work.
And who's going to buy that? Like outside of Disney Studios, legitimately, who is going to buy that?
I mean, I have a coffee can in my office, and every time I pass it, I put $1 in. So eventually I'll be set.
Amazing.
But a lot of people are doing work on notebooks, right? Like most people don't have desktops. Even in the professional world, people are working on the road and going to events, and that GPU situation in the MacBook Pros just can't keep up with what some OEMs are doing on the Windows side.
I mean, literally the past 2.5 years, I've had this huge journey into Windows land. It's never coming from a place where, oh, I'm Team Apple or Team Windows, whatever. Like, I could honestly care less. I could care less what you do with your desktop, because I'm sitting in front of an iMac because I wanted something pretty for my apartment, but that still had power. I wasn't going to build like a huge PC tower. And just certain things fit certain needs. But the one huge glaring problem that I had that I still don't get why anyone buys a maxed out like $4,000 15-inch MacBook Pro, because it doesn't perform on the same level that you can get from similar or even more spec'd out things from, the other OEMs like Dell, Asus, all those people. But I understand that Windows is scary for a lot of people. So I completely understand if you want to stay in the ecosystem. It's just if you need like raw power, I'm just so disappointed in the MacBook Pros. So disappointed.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by the Omni Group, the developers behind such great hits as OmniFocus and Omni Outliner. But today I want to talk about the Omni Sync server. You may think, well, that's not an application, that's just some service. But it's the service to keep your information in the Omni apps in sync. It's all built in and completely free, getting your data across Macs, iPads, and iPhones. You can even use your OmniSync server account to log in to the new OmniFocus on the web. There's a big conversation to be had about security and if your data is safe online, and with the OmniSync server, it is. Communication to and from the server is encrypted using secure HTTPS connections, just like the traffic between your computer and your online banking website. And data is encrypted on the server as well. OmniFocus will sync your entire database with the server, including perspectives and important settings. OmniPlan, OmniOutliner, and OmniGraffle will sync data there as well. And again, you can start on the Mac, pick up your iPad or iPhone, and you're off to the races. And Omni Group offers this for free because they want their customers to have the best possible experience. That's something that I really respect. So learn more over at theomnigroup.com. The Omni Group is passionate about productivity for the Mac, iPhone, and iPad, and we thank them for supporting the show. So what are you using day-to-day for computer hardware?
Yeah, so it's split in between, I guess I would say, 3 machines most of the time when I'm not reviewing another laptop. So it's basically my F131 main gear PC desktop at my office with the 49-inch ultra-wide display, which I'm just obsessed with. I love it so much. And then
I'm gonna interject for a second.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we've talked to anybody on the Mac side using an ultra-wide display, but David is a multi-display person.
Yes.
He's got 2 external displays on his iMac Pro.
There was so much judgment in the way you said that.
And tried to keep it out of my voice, but I couldn't help it. So what if you had to like pitch an ultra wide display to somebody? Like, what's the elevator pitch for a monitor like that?
David, I have to ask: are you a Final Cut person? Do you edit with Final Cut?
Yeah, I do edits in Final Cut. Yeah, but I memean, that's not the reason I have multiple monitors, though.
Yeah. So, that's honestly my biggest thing when people say, what's the thing with ultra wides, is I'm like, just open up a Premiere timeline. It's like so amazing to just because in Premiere you can basically rearrange your folders any way you want. And if you're used to being cramped on a laptop for viewing the timeline, you're always like in a fight for space. And when you're on a 49-inch ultra wide and you just see this beautiful long Premiere timeline, and you don't have to sit there and zoom in, zoom out, like crazy. And you can have all of your effects folders and all of your different footage just sprawled out everywhere. It's like nothing else. And then you still have room, over there on the left or right, maybe for like a Chrome tab, so you can pull some assets, pull some music. So it's just, I love it so much. I truly do. I know that's not a good like elevator pitch, but in terms of like Adobe products and just putting everything out in the open, not having to minimize anything or put it in another space. It's so fun.
Yeah, well, we hear a lot from software developers who use them for similar reasons, where you have a lot of assets and you have your Xcode or TextMate or whatever it is, but you also need a bunch of images and you need documentation, and having it all up at once where you can see it all is just more efficient and faster than command tabbing through a bunch of windows all day.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend maybe the 34-inch ultra wides for normal people, because the 49 is complete overkill.
I don't think it fit on my desk. I'm sitting here looking at my I'm not sure it would fit.
It's one of those things too, when people come into the office, I'm like, hey, check out my ultra wide. It's like one of those things you show off to people.
The scene in Batman, right, where he's wired all the cell phones to find the Joker, like that's what it is.
Oh yes.
Now, when you're not doing video editing, do you use the extra pixels then too? Like, do you have a Microsoft Word page like 80 inches wide?
Honestly,
we have to turn your head while you edit it.
Exactly. It's just a bunch of Chrome windows and maybe Spotify when not editing. I'm very, I don't know what the word for it is. ADD, we'll say that, in terms of, when I have ideas, I have to go here, blah, blah, blah. So it is nice to have like 5 Chrome tabs open with, if I'm on that computer, I'll have just Apple Notes pulled up from iCloud, and then I'll have my email, and then I'll have YouTube, and all of that stuff. So it's nice to space out anything and everything. And you can also do the split thing, where if you have a Windows desktop, you can also like plug in your MacBook or something and have that be half the screen, and then you can share the mouse in between. There's a lot of cool ways to do it.
Yeah, I mean, for one of my externals, because there are 2, one of them is always the calendar and the task list. It's just, I know in my head it's always off to the side, and Steven hates it, but one day we're going to convert him.
No, I don't think so.
No, I appreciate that. I like mini displays, yeah. So that's about 30%, and then the other 33% is my Dell XPS 9570. It has like a 1050 Ti in there, 1 terabyte SSD, and then an i7, because I don't trust any computers with i9s. Until recently, I used the Asus ZenBook Pro Duo, and it's the first laptop I've ever used, and it's a little chunky. It basically has vents, but it's the first laptop I ever used that like properly cooled an i9, and it just screamed. It was like amazing. I'm trying to get my hands on one permanently, but if I don't, I'll just keep rocking my Dell XPS 9570. I've loved that laptop. I think I've used it for almost a year now. And then I have the other 33% is when I'm at home and I use the new iMac. Yeah, the 27-inch iMac that I basically just got really tired hunching over at using my Dell XPS at my apartment. And I didn't want something that I needed, a computer that basically blended in a little bit, because I'm in New York, kind of in a small apartment. It needs to look nice. I don't want to have there's no room for a big desktop PC. And I was like, hey, the iMac has everything that the MacBook doesn't. Like, the iMac has ports. It has USB-A. It has USB-C, Thunderbolt 3. It has an SD card slot, which is crazy, like amazing. And it has a really nice display attached to a pretty powerful computer. So I went with the newer updated 9th gen i9 instead of going with the iMac Pro, just because it seemed, when I was speccing it out, it just seemed like better value. And I didn't need the Xeon processor. But yeah, and then I just updated my own RAM. I think do I have 64 or 128? Wait, I want to sound cool. Oh, I can't sound cool. I only have 64. But that's enough.
Only?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good blend of things. And then iPhone, the new iPhone 11 Pro is my go-to phone.
The most important question is which color?
The midnight green.
Oh man!
I have to go for the new. It's so tempting. Usually, what color do you have?
I did the black. The default.
Okay.
I don't know. I was nervous about the green. It looks way better in person, but when you pre-order, like, what if it's not exactly what I want, but I know David is in love with it.
Yeah, it's great. And it's one of those things where selfishly too, you want to be able to signal to people that you have the new phone.
Yeah.
And hey,
it's green.
It's the new color. So it's the easiest way to do that.
Also has 3 cameras, but the color is what counts.
But this one isn't particularly good if you want to do the show off thing because it looks so close to gray that I don't think a lot of people will even notice. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. Make your next move with Squarespace and enter offer code MPU at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. Here we are in 2019 heading into 2020, and the web is such a big deal for everyone. Everybody needs a website for something. Maybe you're making an online store or portfolio. Maybe you're getting married and you want to make a website for that, or you're getting ready to have a baby. Or maybe you're like me and you just want a platform to talk about nerdy things like I do over at MacSparky. No matter what your reason for getting on the internet is, Squarespace is how you do it. With Squarespace, it's an all-in-one platform that does the hosting, has the web software, it's got everything for you. There's nothing to install or no patches to worry about, no upgrades needed. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Squarespace has got it all covered. They have award-winning 24/7 customer support if you need any help. They let you quickly and easily grab a unique domain name, and all of those award-winning templates are beautifully designed for you to show off your great ideas. I love Squarespace because I use it for all of the web stuff I do. MacSparky is there, Sparks ESQ is there. In fact, that was one of my first defining moments as I was setting up my legal website, getting ready to leave the firm, going to Squarespace, getting that domain with Squarespace, and setting up the account. Building that website for me was therapeutic. And you can do it too for just $12 a month. There's no credit card required by going to squarespace.com/MPU. When you decide to sign up, use the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain and to show your support for the Mac Power Users. Once again, that's squarespace.com/MPU. Build your awesome website with the code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase. We thank Squarespace for their support of this show and all of Relay FM. Squarespace, make your next move, make your next website. Sara, one thing I wanted to ask you about is with all the media you do, you've got to have a real killer backup system in place. And as boring as it sounds, whenever I talk to people who do a lot of media, I want to know how they keep everything backed up.
Well, this is exciting because I basically just solidified a solution that I'm happy with, which is very rare. Because, when it comes to that, it always seems to be like a random slew of hard drives and, I should probably back this up here. And then you just get, lost. But
you do that until recently, one day it doesn't work for you. And then you're like, oh, this isn't working.
Exactly. So I got really tired of individual hard drives for storage and backup. So basically, because I split my time in between my apartment and my office, I got a Synology NAS for the office. So that way when I'm editing with a second editor, sometimes all they have to do is connect via Ethernet and we can share projects very quickly. And then there's a lot of cool software with the Synology NAS that just makes it super easy to where you can do a two-way transfer to where I can always have everything backed up that's on my SSD or my hard drives on my PC there, my desktop. So I basically have 4 terabytes of just hard disks, and then I have 1 terabyte SSD and a 12 terabyte SSD all in my PC. So I have so much footage all over the place on that computer all the time. And I found myself needing a way to access that, but I never think about it. So the NAS always being plugged into the network, my computer always being plugged into the network. It's been really nice that I set up basically these two-way transfers where my 1 terabyte, 512, and 4 terabyte folders on my computer basically are a Synology folder, but they're stored locally on, so basically they copy and I can edit off of my drives locally and they do everything normal there. But then at the same time, the moment I drop that footage on my computer, they're being copied over to the NAS at the same time. So I have all of my backup footage on that NAS when I'm done with a project. It lands in a folder, but then at the same time, I basically have my entire desktop PC covered, and it'll back up live. The moment I throw any new footage on it, it'll go into that 4 terabyte folder or the 1 terabyte folder, which has helped a lot because you can also use what's it called? I think it's called Quick Connect, where you can basically log into your NAS from anywhere you are and basically access it like Google Drive or something. It is a little bit slower than Google Drive when it comes to downloading, but it solved that problem. And then at my apartment, I have a LaCie 6 with like 60 terabytes. So it is, again, RAID like the NAS, but what's nice about this is it's not a NAS, it's basically just a huge hard drives. But it's also RAID, so there's a little bit of redundancy, but it's Thunderbolt 3. So with the iMac, I can basically access all of my footage that I've ever recorded really, really quickly. And so basically everything that is on the NAS in my office is also on the 6 at my apartment. And yeah, it's basically those two things. And then I keep current projects always on like the SSDs of the computer. So if I'm on my Dell, I'm editing video, it's like on that SSD. And then I also carry around like spare Samsung T5s and LaCie Ruggeds for if I need to back up on the road, or if I'm shooting 4K, I just need more room. But it pains me to see people edit videos off of like hard disks. It's just like so sad, because it's like, guys, your internal SSD is like going 2,000 megabytes per second and you're like giving it 200 megabytes per second. So yeah,
I always tell people, if you can just keep enough space on that SSD to do your video edits, even if you can't store everything there once you're done.
Yeah, it's going to be so much faster. The bit about having it 2 places is important as well. We did our backup episode a while back now, towards the beginning of the year. That was a big thing we talked about. Was it's good to have your data on an external drive or have it someplace else, but until it's on 2 drives or in 2 locations, it's still really only 1 copy, right? Like it's still temporary until it's 2 places.
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like it's so funny because I recently made a video about this, and just the way the internet works, it's so lovely. It's like, even when you think you're covered, then there's always that person who comments and no, not 2 places. You also need a 3rd backup.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, guys, the best backup solution is the one that you're going to keep up with.
Yes.
Okay. If I had to worry about a 3rd backup, I wouldn't keep up with it and it would be useless. So I feel like I'm double safe because, both of these things are also RAID. So I do have some lenience where if 1 drive fails, if 2 drives fails at my office, then, I can just replace the drives and it'll rebuild. So I feel like I'm fine, person on the internet.
Wait a second. Someone on the internet, a stranger, thought that you were wrong about something and told you that?
Isn't that weird?
And having it automated is key too, right? If it's something you have to manually do, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to forget to do it. So it sounds like you've got that covered as well with the Synology software handling all that data migration for you.
Yeah, it's super handy. So the only thing that I have to manually do is just make sure that double backup is going in between the NAS and the LaCie 6 So sometimes I'll do that over the interwebs, but usually it's easiest where I basically just keep a folder on each one where it just says like 2019 copy to NAS. So that'll be a folder on my 6 and then on my NAS it'll say like 2019 copy to 6 to where, once it fills up, I have a few projects, I'll basically just plug in, a T5 to one of them. And then next time I go to the office, I'll just transfer that to the NAS and to make sure that's to make sure they're in 2 places. But it's nice that I can just basically, because I travel a lot, the automation is there for when I need footage off of my iMac, when I need footage off of my computer in my office. Because this is a good pro tip for people who don't want to invest in a NAS solution but need to access off of their computer when they travel. I downloaded the Chrome Remote Desktop, and it's so cool to use because you can basically just log into your computer and say, oh, I need to grab that project off my desktop. You can upload it to Google Drive from, anywhere in the world, and your problem is solved. So I have that installed on my iMac. So basically all of my computers are accessible wherever I am, and then my XPS will be with me really wherever I am.
This is the second week in a row we've had a guest recommend that Chrome Remote Desktop product.
It's fantastic. It's free. I mean, I'm sure you're selling something to Google, but aren't we all owned by Google at this point?
Just write it off. It is cool because remote management is something that's, even like on the Mac with something like screens, they've gotten rid of the back to my Mac and iCloud. That's gone. It's kind of a tricky deal because sometimes you got to deal with, opening ports and you got to deal with like your firewall, and to have something that just handles it for you automatically is nice, especially when you're out on the road and you've left that one thing you really need in your office. I think we've all been there. And with media files, I mean, you can't keep all those on Dropbox, right? It's different if you're looking for a contract or some sort of document, maybe that's on iCloud Drive or Dropbox or Google Drive. But these big files, you can't sync them to the cloud in any sort of reasonable way. So you are sort of in like an offline world when it comes to your storage.
Yeah, 100%.
Just put it on iCloud Drive, Sarah. Nothing will go wrong, I promise.
I don't trust iCloud Drive. It's funny. Usually I trust Apple more than Google in general, but then I use Google for most of my services. I mean, I love Google Drive. I love Gmail. Yeah, strange. Because publicly facing, if you ask me, like, who do you trust more? I'd say, oh, Apple, for sure. But then that's not how I treat my data. So
there's different kinds of trust.
Yeah.
There is. And, like Relay runs on Google Apps or G Suite or whatever they're calling it now. And
yeah,
because all those features are there and it all just works. But there's always options. So, Sarah, in addition to doing this YouTube channel, as if that didn't keep you busy enough, you are also a podcaster. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my show is called That Creative Life, and it's had many different forms on my YouTube channel because I love interviewing people and kind of the more documentary style stuff. And then when podcasts got, I don't want to say popular because they've been around for forever. I don't want you guys to hate me for saying that. But when they started really popping off about 1.5 years ago, I was like, hey, I think this name, this brand, it makes more sense as a podcast, and I can get back to interviewing people because the way my YouTube channel started is one of the first projects I did was a docuseries called Creative Spaces TV, and I wasn't even in the videos. And it was a way for me to just interview an entrepreneur, a creative, and figure out how they do what they do and where they do it. And that was so much fun for me. I think still that's one of my favorite things to do. So starting a podcast where I just interview, YouTubers, CEOs, artists, anyone in between, seemed like a easier way to kind of get back to my roots of interviewing people and having content that's a little less Sarah focused. Because when you're constantly filming yourself and editing yourself, there's just a little bit of, I wouldn't say resentment, but it's just a weird feeling when everything suddenly revolves around you. So That Creative Life has been a really fun way for me to just like dive into other people's lives, extract those stories, figure out, hey, how do we make money making art? Because still, I think it's a little bit taboo. And trying to extract lessons from business people that can also help artists, because I've always found myself kind of at this intersection, wanting to make good art, but also really enjoying business and really enjoying how people build businesses. So it's kind of a blend of that, and it's been super fun. I think I'm like 60 episodes in. I've talked to a lot of amazing people. It was fun to kick off the show. Gary Vaynerchuk was my first guest, and I interviewed any from Austin Evans, Jonathan Morrison, Tyler Stallman in the YouTube space, and then CEO wise, Main Gear PC. We've had the CEO of that on. Nilay Patel, who's the editor-in-chief at The Verge, Jack Conte, who's the CEO of Patreon. So just really good insights from people who are out there killing it. And it's been a lot of fun because it also takes pressure off of me. I love asking people questions and then kind of just shutting up. It's one of those things too where, because I'm sure you guys get this question a lot. People are like, hey, how do I start a podcast? Because Relay FM is like I don't even know how to, I mean, you know what y'all are doing over there, right? And so I'm sure you get that question a lot of like, how do I start a podcast? Which blah, blah, blah. And I think people,
every day.
Oh, I'm sure at this point you guys probably have like a blog post to point to.
We do. And with Mike and Jason did like an episode of Upgrade all about it. Like basically like for this episode, we're just going to talk about how you podcast.
Yeah. So to those people, I would say people always look at it as a way, like another thing to monetize, which is completely fine. Like, yes, monetize your art, go for it. But what I found what the most value is just having, like, providing value, one, to the guest. So they're willing to get in a room with you, talk with you for an hour, get to know you more personally. And it's just such a good way to build relationships with people otherwise you probably wouldn't. And you know, me selfishly, I love to create with people. That's how I hang out with people. I don't really have a lot of friends, but for me, like this, talking to you guys is like, we probably wouldn't grab dinner together, but this is like the same thing, right? I love creating with people, and you guys are my friends now, right? That's how I bond with friends. So it's, as long as you can look at it as something that you're going to enjoy doing. And also if you can be strategic with it, where you're, if it's an interview show or if it's where you're reaching out to people, you can really use it as a tool where you're providing value to these people. I'm sure it's going to be so much more fun to accept being a podcast guest than it is, hey, can I pick your brain for 5 minutes over coffee? You know? So it's really just a good hack in general to hang out with people who you want and to, dissect how they do what they do.
No, I agree. I mean, it's just so fun learning about people. And the nice thing about podcasting is you get to share it, but it's also, because of the technology, you get to combine people from all over the place, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff you do is in person, but we try to, you know, we reach out because Steve and I obviously aren't in the same zip code. But it's a wonderful medium.
I love it. Yeah. And I'm such a consumer of it too that, you know, every morning when I'm getting ready for the day, I put on a Tim Ferriss podcast or a Relay FM podcast or, you know, something where I know it's like a good hour chunk. It's going to be productive. And then, you know, I commute all the time on the subway and stuff. So it seems like even though I love music, it seems like a more productive way to like spend that time as well with podcasts or audiobooks.
Well, it's different from video too, that it is a sort of a secondary activity, right? You can be washing the dishes or walking the dog or washing the dog if the dog is dirty. I don't know. Whatever you need to do while listening. And that is possible with a YouTube video, but definitely more difficult, especially if it's something like a product review where it's important to like see the shots of the thing and try to understand it. Whereas with podcasts, you can go about your day and still be learning, still be hearing about somebody's story.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's such an important medium because I think people are getting more busy. People are becoming, you know, much more okay with just putting on an hour podcast and consuming it like the way you said it. So in terms of, you know, how people are creating, I think it's so important to pay attention to audio because it's only going to get bigger.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Hover. When you have that one big idea, where do you go? Where do you start? For a ton of people, Hover is that first big leap because your business often starts with a domain name. Hover has over 300 domain name extensions to choose from. So no matter what you want to build, there's a domain name waiting for it. Hover has excellent technical support to answer any questions you may have, and they're dedicated to getting you online, not upselling you. Hover comes with free Whois privacy, so bad guys don't get your info, really clean user experience when you're buying and renewing domains, and monthly sales on popular top-level domains. So it's easy to see why Hover is the popular choice for starting businesses. I've used Hover for years, and anytime I have a new project, that's where I start. Their domain search tools are really great. You can plug in a keyword, and it will suggest domains that are available to you, and very oftentimes it sparks even more creative ideas. So go buy a domain and start using it today. Head on over to hover.com/MPU and get a 10% discount on all new purchases. That URL one more time is hover.com/MPU. Make a name for yourself with Hover. Our thanks to Hover for their support of this show and Relay FM. So Sarah, before we let you go, I wanted to hear a little bit about some of your favorite apps and services that you're using to get all this work done.
Yes, yeah. So it's been fun because recently I've put an iPad back in my workflow. Usually it doesn't last very long, so we'll see. I'm still using it, which is great. But I went back to a note-taking app that I used in college. I'm surprised that it's still around, but it's so great. And it's called Notability. And one of the coolest features is you can basically audio record at the same time that you're writing notes, and it'll keep that audio, and it'll correspond with what you wrote. So if you preview the audio, it'll be like, oh, you were down here on the second page when this, when it was this place in the audio, and blah blah. So it's been a fun note-taking tool. And then, like we talked before, I use Things, Asana, and it's been fun to get into shortcuts too. And it's crazy that I'm talking to you guys today because I just released a new podcast about shortcuts, interviewing Matthew Casanelli. Do you guys know who that is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. Okay. We know Matt.
Yeah. So he's amazing. He basically taught me about the crazy world of shortcuts. And it's honestly just made having an iPad even more fun. And so, I kind of got schooled for an hour just on shortcuts, the way to use them. And honestly, though, I'm using them more on my iPhone than even on the iPad. So we'll see how long the iPad thing lasts. I'm usually just my iPhone and, my laptop. But with iPadOS, they've just made the iPad fun. Like the different split view and the other view, I totally forgot what it's called. It's now just fun. I guess I don't know any other way to put it. I mean, do you guys use iPad? I know a lot of people do laptop replacement over there, but
Well, I use it as my laptop.
Yeah.
Because it just, and in addition, the term I always use is delightful. It's like there's something about using it.
Yeah.
That there's a certain amount of delight that I don't get in using a laptop. And I know that sounds really dumb, but it's true. And I like using it. But the other thing is Apple has really, I think they've turned it up the last couple of years with iOS 13. Like a lot of the problems that used to keep me from using it more often have been eliminated, and it's not all of them, and there's still things that are easier with a laptop, but a lot of the game stoppers are gone now. Like I bet you'll find as you use the iPad, most of the stuff you need to do, you can do. It may take a little longer, but you can do it. Whereas a few years ago, there was a bunch of stuff you just couldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have to video edit, I would totally hop on board with the laptop replacement. But the fact that I'm editing videos probably 60% of the time, y'all still can't convince me to switch to LumaFusion. Like I can't stand all these videos where it's like, yes, I am a professional video creator and I only use my iPad. I'm like, I don't believe you. I just don't believe you.
Well, Sarah, as weird as this sounds, you're too old. Because there are people out there that grew up using these touch devices.
Yeah.
Who are they're gonna look back at it and they're gonna see like all your keyboard shortcuts and everything. They're gonna go, that is madness.
Yep.
Like you had to go to school to learn how to edit video because you guys had this crazy cockamamie system. So it's just, honestly, it is really weird, but you're too old. Sorry.
I'm convinced that it will become, iPads and laptops will definitely blend. And again, maybe this is why Apple doesn't want to put touch displays and stuff in their laptops, because hey, just buy an iPad instead. But over in Windows land, I mean, what they're doing with the 2-in-1s are amazing. And my Dell XPS has a touch screen, and I find myself touching it all the time. But it's one of those things where it's like, how will these worlds blend? I'm still not, like, a keyboard is, I feel like a keyboard, a physical keyboard, is still going to be necessary for video editing. Maybe not a mouse, but yeah, I'm up for the challenge. I'm willing to see.
I think that's a future video someday.
Oh, totally.
I want to see Sarah edit a video on her iPad.
Jonathan Morrison did it on an iPod Touch, so
Funny.
You got this.
Video sponsored by LumaFusion, right?
Yeah.
Or Rush.
I bet that video gets made before the one where she edits it on Final Cut.
True. Honestly, true. Yeah.
So now that you're using the iPad, have you stumbled into any other apps other than Notability that delight you?
Gosh. I mean, honestly, this would probably be a good time to turn the question to you, David. Tell me some apps I should be using on my iPad.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, Notability is amazing. The thing you said about the way it indexes the audio to the way you're writing,
It's so great.
that is the killer feature of that application. If like you're a student and you're writing down, like you're writing a note saying, Napoleonic War, it will index the recording to the moment you were writing that. You just tap on it later and it'll start playing whatever you're recording from the professor at the moment you're writing that.
It's so sick. Yeah.
However, if you just want a note-taking app, like a traditional notebook, I would say that I think I like GoodNotes better.
Okay.
GoodNotes is a similar app. It doesn't have that audio feature, but the handwriting engine is really powerful. Right now in their beta, they've got a feature where it has a built-in powerful scanner. So like if you're like me and sometimes you write things on maybe a Post-it note or a piece of paper, you can just hold up your iPad or your iPhone to that and it automatically draws the boundary around it and saves it as a digital image to your GoodNotes notebook. If you like Notability, I think GoodNotes is another one that you may want to explore. And then also I would look at, with the stuff you're doing, look at some of the brainstorming stuff, because the way you describe the way you use sticky pads, it's just a brainstorming tool for you. That's the first filter, right? You write things down.
Right.
And then once you decide, okay, this is a real project, then it starts becoming digital for you. There's some really great brainstorming apps. MindNote is my favorite. And I did produce the tutorial videos for them years ago. So call me biased, but it's on all devices. It's on iPad and iPhone and Mac. So you can brainstorm into that as a digital platform as opposed to sticky notes. That may be something worth trying.
I really like that sort of work on the iPad paired with the Apple Pencil.
Yeah.
Especially, MindNote and GoodNotes, where you can write things out and sort of you're not constrained to just what text can give you. I'm not a huge mind mapping person, but when I need to do it, that's always what I reach for.
Now, do college professors, is there a thing now? Like, do they allow you to record them when you do something like Notability?
Oh, yeah. No,
is
I
that
mean,
a problem?
even when I was in college, 4 or 5 years ago, I used my iPad and used Notability. And even though there wasn't the Apple Pencil, you could just get one of those like digital pins off of Amazon that would have that ball at the end with the little plastic circle thing. And it was great. And that's what I used.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's weird to come back to Notability 5 years later and be like, oh, it really hasn't changed that much.
Yeah. It's just way better with the Apple Pencil. Mm-hmm. That'd be a good college setup, actually, an iPad mini, like one of the little ones that now supports the first generation Apple Pencil and Notability.
Yeah.
Boy, that takes almost no room in your backpack and you're good.
Totally.
Definitely better than like lugging around a 15-inch PowerBook like some of us did, right? Like I was that one guy, like had to sit near the wall to keep it plugged in.
Did you have a mouse too? You had to have a mouse.
I did not have a mouse. I would today because I hate trackpads, but then I was younger and didn't know that trackpads would eventually, destroy my hands. So, but now I would be that guy. No shame.
How about the same question on your iPhone? Are there any apps that cause you joy when you use them?
Yeah, I am so boring because I'm like such a stock app person. I actually made a video about this where I was like, why I use all Google apps. Because it really, as a person who is very Windows as well, I've always been on iPhone. Very rarely in my life have I been on Android, but being so split in between Windows and Mac, I'm honestly finding myself, even though I use Things is the one iPhone app that I love and I always use and I never get away from. But even recently, I've been kind of straying away from Notability and just using Apple Notes because it's so easy when I'm on my laptop or my desktop at my office. I just log into iCloud over the web and there's like a web notes version. That's what I so struggle with. I'm like, Notability, why don't you just have a web version that with limited features, but you could still type into a note and I can finish my thoughts on maybe no matter what device I'm using. Besides things in Asana, I am so like Google Drive and so I'm Google Drive, Google Photos and Gmail. And I am slowly getting back to Apple Mail just because I'm learning how to use the VIP feature. And actually, you know what spurred this is the Today view. Now that's just, I actually use it more with shortcuts and my calendar features, and it's always on my iPad. I really like the Today view widget where you can have like only the VIP emails in your in there. So that's actually why I'm trying Apple Mail again, because I do love like the smart features of Gmail. And so I'll go in, my 2 important emails, just access them via Gmail. But in terms of viewing everything, Apple Mail actually has kind of gone back into my workflow.
I just had an email from a listener saying, they don't want to use the Gmail app, but they use Gmail. And then my point was, look, you got to stop fighting it. I feel like if you're going to use Gmail, you just got to use the Google Gmail app because a lot of the features just don't come over. I mean, you can still have Apple Mail running to get you the VIPs and whatnot, but honestly, so much of the Gmail, the goodness of using Google is staying with their I recommend on a desktop computer just use their web client. I think it's better than the apps, and on the iOS device, you just got to use the Google apps if that's what you're going to do.
And the app is great because you can have an aggregate inbox where it's all of your emails in one. So I think a lot of people get freaked out because they think, oh, I can't view my 5 emails that I have, because I'm one of those psychos who literally has 6 different email addresses. But it does it well. It's still smart. It says, hey, you haven't replied to this person in 3 days, which is sometimes the worst. But I'm a big fan of Gmail, but I always kind of go back to stock apps, as sad as that is.
I 3 days. I replied to a listener after 6 months, and they wrote me back, and they thought I was insane. They're like, "Look, next time it's 6 months old, you don't have to reply."
That sounds like me. I respond to the emails that my manager texts me to respond to. And then, Steven basically DM'd me on Twitter, and that's pretty much the only reason why I'm here on this lovely podcast today. If it was strictly email, this would have never happened. Yeah.
Never would have made it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to go right to the source,
All right. Sara Dietschy, sounds like peachy. Thanks so much for coming on the Mac Power Users. Everybody listening to this show, go over and check out this amazing YouTube channel. Like I said, you will fall into a hole. It did cost me a new bike helmet. And I'm a subscriber now, one of your many.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next.
That means so much.
Where should people go if they want to learn more about what you're up to?
Luckily, I'm easy. It's at Sara Dietschy everywhere, but that's not the easiest name. So if you just want to Google me, you can Google Sara Peachy, and then I'm sure you can go down to the show notes for the rest, because it is a very difficult name to spell. And then, YouTube, podcast. I am starting a new project that I can't say a ton about, but if you hate editing micro content, you could go put in your email to switchboard.ai, and you're going to get an email in January 2020 that will hopefully solve your problems.
Just leave it. Don't say any more. Leave it mysterious enough, right?
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
All right. Well, we are the Mac Power Users. Thanks again, Sara, for coming on the show. Thank you to our sponsors, SaneBox, Omni Group, Squarespace, and Hover. And we'll see you all next week.